have a lot of Lovecraftian movies in this episode. Well, only 3 actually, but plenty of horror, and 2 Russian crime films that are quite good. All in all, a bunch of good movies and a bunch of okay ones. Find out which ones to smash right now on Smash TeeVee. In the Dunwhich horror, also known as Witches, the Dunwhich horror Necronomicon, a mother gives birth to a monstrous baby. 10 years later, Dr. Armitage, played by Dean Stockwell, who also was the star in the 1970 Dunwich horror, and his assistant discover that a certain page from the infamous Necronomicon is missing, and that a cult named the Black Brotherhood are trying to open a gate to Yog-Sothoth and bring the end of the world to our doorstep. With the help of other people, they try to stop this. As you can tell, there's a lot going on in this movie, and I haven't even told you everything. It has several plots converging and throws in stuff that feels out of place. An example of this is an exorcism scene where they exorcise one of the Lovecraftian creatures from a person or something in that vein. It didn't really fit in the Lovecraftian lore in my opinion, but hey, it's a movie based on the Cthulhu mythos, so it must be seen. Unfortunately, the track record of these films aren't very good, and this one isn't much to write home about either. The effects are cheap, the acting mostly subpar, and like said, it's trying to do too much and not doing a good job at it either. Too bad really. Maybe the 1970 Dunwich horror will be better and more akin to the actual story. I'll keep you posted. Check that. Necronomicon, also known as H.P. Lovecraft's Necronomicon, is an anthology movie that gives us 3 stories and a wraparound featuring Jeffrey Combs playing Howard Phillips Lovecraft, who is trying to get some information on the infamous book for his stories and ends up reading about more than his mind can comprehend. That sounds great, doesn't it? Unfortunately, none of the 3 stories are particularly interesting. One deals with a man attempting to revive a loved one. The other deals with a string of murders linked to someone trying to keeping someone alive. And the last one is about a woman who gets into a car crash and begins experiencing visions of her unborn baby. The 3 stories are linked together and makes the whole experience feel a bit underwhelming. Of all the stories he could read in the library, these are quite unlikely and quite boring, to be honest. Of course, there's tentacles and goopy eyes and all kind of droopy slime. Lovecraftian buzzwords, but the expected cosmic horror and insanity aren't there enough to make this super compelling. Due to the anthology nature of this film, this also feels like a TV series rather than a movie, but then again, I'm not a fan of anthology movies. Abdul Hayes Reed would not roll himself in his urn, but it would at least shake a bit knowing that most of the movies based on his work pretty much suck more than you would expect. Check that. A couple is on a boat vacation somewhere off the Spanish coast when a sudden storm crashes their boat on some rocks, forcing them to go ashore in search of help. When they arrive at the coast, however, they discover a nearly empty town, and after getting assistance with quite some difficulty, they notice that the 2 companions stuck on the boat have mysteriously disappeared. Having the title of Dagon will immediately warn Lovecraftian fans what this movie is going to be about. For those who don't know the premise I just told you will tell you enough. It's gonna be stormy, it's gonna be wet, and there's probably gonna be something with fish. Dagon, surprisingly, is one of the better Lovecraftian movies I have seen, especially since it's effective in the story it's telling and the dread the survivors go under. It also helps that everything is so disgustingly wet. The walls are wet, the floors are wet, the faces, wet, but mine's the boyish charm and rugged good looks. The effects are a little dated and cheap, but that doesn't keep this movie from just simply being good. Go check it out, you won't be disappointed. Smash that. Russian movie Brat, also known as Brother, tells us the story of Danila Bagrov, an ex-soldier who is asked by his brother to assassinate a crime lord in St. Petersburg and lands into a life of crime. Danila, however, lives by a certain code, and he is, by all means, a good guy. People don't take him seriously due to his wacky composure and acting, but my dear lord, He is a force to be reckoned with. I'd be remiss to compare him to John Wick, cause so much he does feel too much like him, but John Wick is a caricature and mostly a comic book character, where Dunwhich is more grounded and realistic. To compare him to that action fest trilogy would do him a disservice. But by golly, do you root for this music-loving man and what he does. Brother is an extremely enjoyable movie with humor and action and a whole lot of heart. It was a massive success in Russia and deserves a lot more praise outside of the country due to the fact this is doing what American movies only started to do in the early 90s. Go watch Brat immediately and be sure to check out my review of the sequel to see if you should watch that as well. Small hint, fuck yeah you should. Smash that. A bunch of Vietnam POWs escape imprisonment, torture and death by the Viet Cong and form a bond for life. Fast forward several years when they save a person from a dastardly robbery at their job. One of the POWs gets attacked and paralyzed for life. His friend, who he owes a debt, vows vengeance and sets out to kill the scum that did this to his friend. And that's not the only scum he deals with. The Exterminator is pretty much an 80s version of the Equalizer, where a Vietnam veteran decides to tick off criminals and scum of the earth with lots of guns and explosions. And it's all pretty cool until it gets a wee bit repetitive and the stakes aren't increased over the time with more explosions, more shooting, more death and killing. Don't get me wrong, The Exterminator is a cool movie, but you expect it to become even more cool so that this guy actually becomes a masked vigilante. And maybe he does, eventually, but we don't get to see it cause there was never a sequel. Regardless though, The Exterminator is a fun and oh-so 80s action movie that will certainly bring a smile on your face. A smile though, not a grin. Check that. Environmentalism has been a hot topic for quite some time now, as we have been threatened with acid rains, new ice ages, rising sea levels, ozone layer holes and now climate change for decades. Regardless of the truth or nonsense in this, I think we can all agree that environmentalists to the core can be quite annoying. Kinda like vegans, having a superiority complex that makes their message fall upon deaf ears cause they are, quite frankly, no fun at all. In Silent Running we have one of these fellas on a spaceship with a couple of other people, and even they don't like the guy. The spaceship under their command hold the Earth's forests alive as the real Earth is thrown into an unseen ecological cataclysm, and then they get the word to blow it all up. Needless to say that the botanist, played by Bruce Stern, doesn't like this and he revolts with the help of his 3 very cute robots. And that's about it really. Of course things happen, but we follow the reasoning of the guy across the movie and are dealt a cautious tale that doesn't quite annoy you enough with environmental propaganda and blame to anger you. Unfortunately it also doesn't show you enough of the stakes cause what he is trying to achieve is pretty much futile. Silent Running doesn't seem to be able to convey exactly what it's trying to tell the viewer, but you do get a sense that what he is trying to do is important. But as you see the ending you wonder, what was it all for? Silent Running has heart and it almost feels like one of those 80s feel-good movies for teens with cute robots and adventure. It's not, however, and were it not for the cute robot interactions it would be a dark tale indeed. And that's the duality of this movie and the message it brings to us. And maybe, just maybe, that's the genius of it. Check it out. Check that. 2 very dreamy identical twins have special powers and abuse it to see if they have some sort of feelings inside of them. Like any normal person, you would of course try to see if you have them by wooing a girl, or looking at a cute animal, but no. There's something really wrong with these 2, and they prefer forcing a group of jock bullies to do a rigged version of Russian roulette with expected outcomes. Having 4 people commit suicide like this raises questions, and a cop with his own traumas is sent over to investigate. What happens next is a cat and mouse game between the cop and the 2 brothers, and we witness what jealousy does to even the strongest bond. Seconds Apart is an interesting horror movie that does what you expect it to do. Its stark way of filming and the oft horrific things that happen due to the boys' actions keep you watching till the very bitter end. Check that. Brat 2 is the sequel to the immensely good First Brother movie that I reviewed not so long ago. It continues the story of Dunwhich as he is now residing in Moscow and invited to appear on TV as a war hero with a couple of his army buddies. Unfortunately, he finds one of those buddies dead in his apartment sometime later and, having the code he has, ventures out to find those who did it and bring them to justice, wherever they may be. Brat 2 suffers a little bit of sequelitis where the stakes are made a little bit more intense, and in this movie some familiar faces go to the United States. This offers up some often hilarious clashes in culture, as the very Russian Dunwhich and his friends deal with the American way of life in the early 2000s. The moments cultures clash are very fun to see, though some members of the woke brigade may find some offense in some. But then again, where don't they find offense in? Brat 2 is a good sequel and another must-see Russian movie. It's a little bit less edgy than the first one, mainly due to the fact it's 10 years later and mostly plays out in a sometimes weird-looking America. I was sad to read, however, that Sergei Bodrov Jr., who plays Dunwhich, died during an accident in 2002 and that he will not be in the upcoming Third Brother. Well, maybe he will with special effects and whatnot, but will it still be the same? Time will tell. Go watch this. Make it a double feature if you haven't seen the first one yet. Check that. Camille 2000 is a 1969 adaptation of the 1848 novel and 1852 play by Alexander Dumas called La Dame aux Camées tilde copyrightless, where we follow the very attractive Marguerite, played by Danelle Gorbet, a high-class lady who enjoys herself some money, some parties and some promiscuous sexual encounters. A handsome man by the name of Armand falls in love with her, and Marguerite weighs the benefits of her polyamorous lifestyle with it of being in a relationship. And relationships is what this movie is all about, really. From falling in love to trying to keep each other's interest, jealousy, promiscuity, infidelity, breakup, heartbreak, retaliation, the works. Camille 2000 is delightful in its depiction of a late 60s sexual revolution, and besides the aesthetics of plastic bed sheets and furniture at utile scissors alien mirrors to great effect, there are long scenes bordering on orgies, and has a very long sex scene where Marguerite and Armand make passionate love with the Agatha. This is not a porno, however, and is firmly classified as an erotic art house type of movie. It has nudity but no penetration, and everything is done very tastefully. So tastefully that I wonder how much subtext there was put in some of the cinematographical decisions. Camille 2000 is a sign of the times, the swinging 60s, with swinging music and swinging people having a good old time until the morning breaks and reality crashes the party. But there's always a new party to be had, right? This movie has enough layers to have me recommend it wholeheartedly. Don't be a prude who shies away from some nudity and sex, though. It's a European film after all. Check that. Time Walker is a 1982 movie about an irradiated mummy who goes after his stolen diamonds after a group of scientists dig up his sarcophagus and use too much radiation to see what's inside. There's more to the mummy than meets the eye, but all you need to know is that he has a killer time trying to get his treasure, and all the scientists and their kin are fighting for clues and survival. There's not much to say about the movie besides that it's a more modern version of old mummy movies, inserting a little bit of science fiction to keep things fresh. Being made in the early 80s, however, it already felt a bit dated back then and does so even more watching it now. There's nothing new happening in this movie, and everything that happens can be considered as quite cliché tilde copyright. The plot isn't interesting enough, and the way it's been shot isn't quite a revelation either, and it was given a Mystery Science Theater 3000 for a reason. To be honest though, there are much worse movies than this, but it just isn't very compelling, and the MSD3K shtick isn't all that either. It's low budget, it's early 80s VHS schlock, and everything you expect when watching the cover or posters online. Watch E.T., Cocoon, Batteries Not Included, or even Life Force instead. Smash that. There. That was another episode of Smash TV. Damn, I've really been watching a lot of movies lately. I almost feel like I'm going to have a burnout since that motherfucker Yitza Lemons doesn't do a lot of drawing videos anymore. I guess he will at one point. He'll have to really, cause I can't keep up this pace.